Hello, everyone. We will be joined live with Nikko in just a moment. Just waiting to get her on. So, I'm hoping it goes smoothly. I was trying to do it from the computer, but looks like I have to do it on the phone. Thank you for joining. I hope that this will be inspiring for you all, as it has been for me. And meeting Nikko through Quantum Biology Collective has been really awesome. We connected right away. And she is a doula, but I will be asking her some questions to learn more about her and more about her story, because I don't know what her background was before that. So I'm curious to see how she got into the doula work. You all know that I had a doula myself, and I highly recommend that everyone gets a doula because they are so supportive and so helpful when it comes to pain management and just understanding the physiology and process of birth. That can be very life-changing for many women. There she is. Okay, I'm just going to wait for her to... Oh, okay, I have to accept. Uh-oh. Yay!
Hello! I made it!
Awesome! Awesome! I'm so happy to have you!
Yeah, me too. This is great.
Oh yeah, this is my first, I was just telling my followers, this is my first time ever doing a live with someone else, and I'm so happy it's with you, Nikko. I
Yeah.
feel honored to have you join us today, and to be able to hear about your story. I was just sharing with my followers that you are a doula. That's as far as I know right now. I know you are certified by Applied Quantum Biology, Quantum Biology Collective.
Yeah.
Um, my audience and myself would love to learn more about you and who you are, how you got started as a doula. What was your background before that? Were you always a doula? If you're a mother, to how many? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your story.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it's so great to be here. This is my first time going live on Instagram. Yeah, so I just started podcasting this year, so I've done quite a few interviews now, but this is my first time doing one here, so I'm really excited and glad that we worked this out. I have always wanted to do birth work. That was where I set my course when I was young. Youngish, 17 years old or so. And so I have been slowly walking along this path. And I was one of those people that I wanted to have my own experiences before really stepping out. So this year, and what I thought we might be talking about today was our birth experiences. I just had my fourth baby. So I've had several, quite a few different stories and ways that it's all played out. And yeah, I first did a doula training right before my first daughter was born, a postpartum doula training. So I did prenatal and postpartum consults for about 10 years before getting my labor doula certification.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I got the Quantum Biology Collective certification earlier this year. I was so happy when I found them and everything that they've put together to just fill in the pieces and make sure that I was on point. I have a biology degree, and I knew I wanted to do birth work, but I wasn't quite sure what role I would eventually take. if that makes sense. And so I kind of started even thinking about being an OB. So I was in the
Yeah.
pre-med route when I was at university. And then the more I learned, the more I realized that things there weren't aligned with what I was reading, talking with other women, and then having my own experiences. The more I went into birth, the more I realized that I didn't want that surgical training. I'm happy for people to have that surgical training, but that was not what resonated with me personally.
Mhm.
So right now I'm working as a doula and eventually will serve as a home birth midwife
Awesome.
when my children are older. Right now I like being a doula because it's a support role. I work with mamas virtually too, which is really neat. And yeah, so I'm still very much feel like I'm, just constantly learning. Like I am one of those people. I just love finding things out, researching.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what I share on Brighter Days, Darker Nights is just the research around, like, if a client says, oh, like I'm having liver issues, then I'll be like, let's go and look at that. Okay, hello, PubMed, let's find what we can find and try to get some additional like supportive lifestyle things. So I'm not like a medical provider at this point in my career, but I'm trying to find the ways that people can take charge of their own experiences and apply this lifestyle stuff. It's been so powerful for me, so healing, um, and yeah, just completely transformative. So I'm really passionate about sharing it because nature is so accessible, that anyone can find this out and then figure out little ways. Any free person can get outside in the morning, even if they're behind a hill or behind buildings, like the sunlight is still there. So yeah, that's where I think it's so valuable. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about you because, you and I, we've talked for, I think we talked for over an hour the first time we connected, right? It was just one of those like ping, ping, ping,
We
ping, ping, ping.
clicked. I love that. I don't have that
Yeah.
with a lot of people, so I was like, yes, this is my person.
Yeah,
Awesome.
exactly. I love that too. So, yeah, I'd still like to learn a little bit more about you too. And for any of my people who have jumped on to kind of hear about your story, where you're coming from. Yeah.
Okay, I'll share a little bit about my story. So I'm an occupational therapist by training. I have 6 years experience in the hospital system. I worked primarily with older adults in the rehabilitation setting in inpatient rehab facilities, and that just
Mm-hmm.
means that after someone has gotten out of an acute situation, whether it was a surgery, it could have been an elective surgery, ortho, maybe it was an acute emergency situation, a stroke, all kinds of everything under the sun, heart, stroke, brain injury, every condition you can think of, I feel like
Yeah.
I've seen. And even when I feel like I've seen it all, I haven't, especially in the
Mm-hmm.
last 3 years. Um, so I worked for 6 years in that setting where people come to get rehabilitated, and then get back on their feet, walk again. As an occupational therapy, it was daily activities, getting them back to their daily things, just being able to use the bathroom, being able to put their clothes on, and then even preferred activities, things that they enjoy doing just to increase their quality of life, like being able to get to the beach. How am I going to get back on the beach if I'm in a wheelchair, if I'm wheelchair bound, things like that. That's what OTs primarily, that's what we do. And in the hospital, it looks very much like physical therapy. In 2019, I kind of broke away. I still worked in the hospital, but I decided I wanted to study pelvic therapy, pelvic floor
Mm-hmm.
therapy.
Yeah.
And that was because my husband and I talk about having a lot of kids. You said you have four.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
amazing. Goals for us. Um,
Yes.
that's beautiful. And we
Mm-hmm.
want we want a lot of kids. And when we were having these discussions, I had a lot of fear about all of the entire process because in my situation and my experience, everything I had heard about pregnancy and labor and birth was that it was hard and it was
Mm-hmm.
bad and it was just like a cloud of loom and gloom surrounding all of it. And I was just like,
Yeah.
I don't want this to be my situation.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you, I'm like, I don't want, I'm very much not a group think person. I'm always going against the grain. I'm always looking for my own answers. If someone tells me
Right.
something like, oh, well, 20% of people can do this, but, you know, bigger chances that, you know, you're not going to be able to do this, you know? So I'm always like, okay, maybe I'm in that 20%. Let's find the way, you know?
Right.
So I started studying everything I could about pregnancy and labor and childbirth and rehabilitating postpartum. And then that's when I came across pelvic floor. And I was like, we talked about this in school when I was in occupational therapy school. We talked about pelvic floor because we learned manual muscle testing for all the skeletal muscles in the human body and how to subjectively test to see what the strength is of that particular muscle. And when we got to the pelvic floor in our book, they just like skipped it over. They're like, oh, you don't have to know this unless you specialize. Skip. And I was like, whoa, what is this? It was like the private parts. And I was like so curious. I was like, whoa, there's muscles down there. So I had this flashback when I came across this term, pelvic rehabilitation. I was like, I need to get into this. This is what I need to study. And then as I kept digging and learning the process of what happens around birth in the hospital, I was like, oh, I don't want this to be my situation. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to have an induction. I don't want to get an epidural. I don't want to have a C-section. I don't want any of these things.
Nope.
How can I make sure? Exactly. How can I make sure that this doesn't happen to me? And that's when I started educating myself. And when I'm telling you, Nikko, I had fear. Like I would call my best friend, who at the time was out of state, crying out of fear for what would come with pregnancy. And I have a history of some mood stuff, and in my teen years that I was worried would come out postpartum.
That's really common.
Yes. And I thought this was I was bound to have postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum everything. I didn't have any of these things. And so I studied, starting in 2019, that's when I started the pelvic floor route. And then in 2020, I learned about quantum biology and more so the power of the sun and the healing nature of it all, and how important it is for us to align with nature. And then I started doing all the things in 2021, and I was sticking to all the circadian things from 2021 to 2022, you know, around the time I got pregnant, and even as much as I could in my pregnancy. I even had a ketogenic lifestyle for a good, I would say a year solid, and then after that, it was like a on and off. And then I got pregnant, and I still tried to keep those things. And so that was my background. And so I still worked in the hospital up until I was 8 months pregnant. I had my own private clients for pelvic floor therapy. And then after 8 months, I decided to stop working, and I thought I was going to have an extended maternity leave, but I never went back to the hospital. And so here I am.
All right.
Here I am.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's so wonderful. It is that thing that when you dive into it and start finding out all the things, then you just want to try them and experiment with them in your own life, because, is this real? And then as soon as you test it, you feel it. And it's like deep, like I shared in some of our promo posts, that it's all levels of being that it connects to when you start doing this, connection to nature, connection to sunlight, connection to the earth. Like getting out on the beach is such a powerful force. And so it makes sense. Like when I was learning about childbirth, I read a lot of people using the ocean waves and storms on the ocean as a metaphor to describe what it's like to be in labor, with the power of the forces that your body is going through, and how you can't fight the nature is going to flow through you. And the more you can flow through with that, the easier you're going to have, and the more whole and intact you will be through the process. And so it completely makes sense that when you actually in tune to nature is where all of our fertility comes from. All life on earth is coming from the earth and the sun. We know that in a biological sense, and we know that when we think about plant life or animal life. And it's also true of human life that we need that connection to earth, and that we have to now be deliberate about it because of the um, way that the modern lifestyle is structured. So we kind of have to make it happen if we want to have it, because it's so easy to just slip into being inside all the time and maybe
Yeah.
only having a minute or two outside a day.
Yes, exactly. And as you're saying this, I'm like moving my screen away from me because I have my computer open. I have my a
Yeah.
guide of questions that I want to ask. But you said it perfectly. Modern day life has changed a lot. And look at your beautiful background. It's changed a lot for a lot of people, how we live and how we do life. So I'm curious. You have 4 babies. When did you practice these circadian habits for all of your babies, or did you start with your later ones? And what have you noticed? Is there a difference in your pregnancies and childbirth?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can see, I'm out here. I live in the deep forest in Southern Oregon.
So beautiful.
And so I lived out here for my first baby's birth, and my husband at that time had started learning about some of this. This was back in 2011, 2012. And so we were, he was like unplugging the electric in our whole house every night before we go to sleep.
Yes.
And so this was in my first labor. It was so smooth. I had, I woke up in the morning having contractions. I labored through the day. And I remember like walking around outside, and I kind of shared about this in one of the posts where I was going, and like the surges would hit and I would be like looking like grabbing for a tree or something. And
Wow.
and
Okay.
when the surges hit, it's so like sudden. And so that was where later on I found these older pictures of women laboring on a walking staff. And I was like, oh, that's what I needed, because that was the hardest part of like trying to like have a person with me to clutch onto them, or like find a tree, or like drop to the ground. And so I discovered the walking staff for my third and fourth labors. And so that has been my great friend for labor. And I just like, I can't describe how grounding it is to have that empowered staff, like to be able to sink it into the ground and move through the surges in that way. Now, my second and third births, I had a little bit more challenge with. With my second, I had moved into the city. And so I was living in Portland, Oregon. We were in an upstairs unit. And so there was like, it was so hard. I had such bad morning sickness. And that was really, really big challenge. And then I was like, I can't do this here in the city. I just can't. Like, I was raised out in the woods. The city life was not jiving with me, especially once I was so sick, just the smell of everything. And so we up and moved back out to the forest. And I happened to move at such a time that I couldn't get a midwife for that birth. My insurance wouldn't cover it, and we didn't have the finances to be able to pay out of pocket. So I ended up having an OB and going to the birth center for that birth, just because of the timing of everything, how it worked out. And
this was your second?
This was my second, and it was so hard laboring in the hospital. And I had a 49-hour labor. It was super long. I still went like 0 and, none of their interventions. I still had my physiological birth, but it was hard. It was so hard for me to relax in that environment.
Yeah.
And I processed a lot of things in that time. It was very incredible. And then with my third, I was back to living my circadian lifestyle. But then we had a wildfire out here. Like I said, I'm out in the forest, and so wildfire is a risk. And we actually had to be evacuated from our home because the wildfire was encroaching, and they were doing back burnings on our land, like 30 feet away from our houses, to prevent the fire from coming down the hill and torching everything. So we had to leave. And so I was outside of my zone, super high stress situation. I didn't have control of my circadian lights. It was really, really difficult. And that baby, and it was also COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And
Wow.
so I actually had an unassisted birth that time because I was so afraid of the medical system at that point. And my baby was born. My labor was the same as my first. I woke up in labor. I labored through the day. She was born at sunset. However, a couple hours later, she started going into respiratory distress. And so we ended up transporting to the hospital. And it was very minor, but we spent a week there in the NICU. Pretty much once you're in, they're like, well, we have to do observations, blah, blah, blah. When we left, they're like, this is the shortest rap sheet we've ever seen.
Okay.
um, you know,
Awesome.
so it was good. She was fine. We made it through all of that. But that time in the NICU, that was when after that's when I started Brighter Days, Darker Nights, and started really digging into the research and really like dedicating myself to educating, because I had been through now these 3 experiences, had felt viscerally what a difference it makes, you know, to live inside
Absolutely.
of circadian and natural flow versus outside of it. And then the healthcare providers knew nothing. And I was seeing them going through these horrible troubles, like day shift workers, you know, whatever, night shift workers were telling me about their thyroid problems, about, you know, women whose hair was falling out,
Yep.
about how they had beaten cancer, about how their immune system was trash, all these, you know, obesity, just all kinds of things among the night shift people. And seeing that just 24-hour environment and recognizing that like I had been in it for close to 10 years at that point. So I kind of felt like everyone knew already because I had already
That's
known so
that's what
long.
happens with me too. I feel like everyone already knows. Like, why do I have to keep repeating myself? But I heard from someone, sorry to interrupt you. I heard someone
No,
tell
you're
me
not
one
interrupting.
time, a coach, she said, Amy, it takes 7 times for someone to hear something, 7 times for them to actually hear it. And they
Yes.
they may just only start processing it that 7th time. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you for sharing that. It's true. I
Mm-hmm.
I I go through the same thing.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's natural and so easy to, you know, just fall into it, and then just to be, you know, like in a community of people who are also doing it, who also know. And then, but yeah, so I had that experience that popped me out of that bubble, and I realized that um, no one was sharing this message, and, or I mean, not that no one else is, but that I had a message to share and I had a story to tell. And
Yeah.
so I started publishing. I started on Substack because I'm one of those, you know, weird writer, nerdy reading people. I learn really well by reading and writing, so that's my main medium. And then this year, I've just started doing video and verbal storytelling, um, to, you know, try to branch out and reach more people with this, because like I'm reading studies, and so I'm kind of translating text to text, and then I'm also finding like, you know, there are people who just need a little bit quicker bit, like there's a lot of different ways to share that information. So that's what I'm kind of experimenting with right now and trying to grow and offer mentorship. But um, I think
That's
that
awesome.
it would be fun to talk because we both gave birth this year. And my 4th
Yeah.
pregnancy, I was so deliberate and careful about everything. I had an amazing midwife and birth team. I had 2 doulas and my midwife and my
Wow.
husband, my children. And it was just a totally beautiful experience that was very similar, waking up, having the labor through the day, and then baby born at sunset. Seems to be my
Wow.
pattern. 3 of my children have been born that way now.
Wow. That's amazing. So you
Yeah.
had your labor started
Mm-hmm.
and the baby was born in the same day for 3 of them?
Yeah. Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
which I know is different because you had the home birth, but you also had the really long birth because I had the 49. You said yours was over 50, right? Was that
It was
yours 3 days?
53 hours of labor. And I
Yeah.
have a theory as to why I think that happened, even though I
Mm-hmm.
was doing all of the things. I was grounding, I was out in nature, I didn't have any medication. It was not a medicalized birth. It was a home birth. All my labor was at home. I mean, besides when we were on the beach, we were at the beach and I
Yeah.
had my photographer scheduled that day. I didn't expect to go into labor.
Wow.
We had kept pushing my photography because of the weather, and I wanted my pictures at sunrise with the light
Mm-hmm.
coming up, and I got exactly what I wanted. So they
Oh,
turned
how
out beautiful.
sweet.
Yeah,
Yes.
but that Tuesday at 3 a.m., that Tuesday I was supposed to have our photo shoot. I knew this was real labor because I woke up with really strong contractions, and I had the false contractions that I knew. I'm like, this is very light. I wasn't sure if it was real, but I told my midwife they started on like the Saturday before, and it was Saturday and Sunday, and then it went away. And they felt more like period cramps, menstrual cramping of the uterus. And I was like, okay, this is just Braxton or whatever they want to call it. And then it went away. And then Tuesday I woke up and I was like, okay, this is the real deal. I went and got checked. The baby was engaged, already moving down in the pelvis. It was the first time I got checked because my mom was in town. I didn't want any kind of internal exam during pregnancy. And my midwife was awesome enough not to force me to do anything like that, which is why I hired her. We were very in line. The only reason I wanted to check then was because my mom was in town and she was supposed to fly out to Chicago that day. So I was like, there's no point for her to fly and then come back when I'm going to have the baby. So I asked the midwife, hey, can we check just to see how it looks? Even though I know that dilation and cervical effacement doesn't really tell you how much longer you have because it's different for everyone. But she checked and she said, the baby's going to come before the weekend. I was like, well, I hope it's not going to be close to the weekend. I hope it's like today. And sure enough, so my mom stayed. I went home. My husband took off work. He already started his like paternity, to be there to support me. And, we had our pictures earlier that day because I saw my midwife after our pictures. I was laboring. Some of the photos, you can see me having contractions. I haven't shared any of those yet, but yeah. And the baby ended up coming on Friday. And what was really interesting, what was really interesting was that when I went to see my midwife, the contractions got as close as 7 minutes apart. And I was like, okay, the baby's coming. For sure, the baby's coming today. I was so excited. I wasn't scared. I was happy. I was really like, yay, this is happening. And as nighttime came, my contractions got further and further apart. And I was like, okay, what's going on? They got to like 40 minutes apart. And I was like, all right, I was able to go to sleep. My doula, she wasn't there with me, but we were keeping in touch with phone. And she said, Amy, go to sleep. Make sure you sleep, rest. Because if this is a longer labor, you want to have the energy. Because usually the energy that women lose, and it's why they end up doing things that maybe they didn't plan for. At least in my experience, this is what I've seen. They feel like, I can't do it anymore. Give me the drugs. Do the induction. Do whatever you need to do. Give me the epidural. And they end up, I think, in a way, giving up. And I didn't want this. I was like, no, whatever happens, I'm going to stick it through. And it's going to happen at home. I was so fearful of doing it in the hospital. That's what kept me, I think, at home. And as long as I was home, I felt good. I felt safe. And I was like, we're still on track. Everything is on track. Yeah. And so my contractions would spread so far apart at night that I was able to sleep. And I would wake up with contractions and then fall back asleep. Wake up with contractions, fall back asleep. Thursday came. So this was Tuesday. I went through it Wednesday. I went through it Thursday. Thursday, they were always getting closer together. And then at night, they'd get far apart. And it's almost as if my contractions were following a circadian rhythm. Like my body knew that it's nighttime and it's time to go to sleep. During this time, I would go outside. I'd take walks. I always got my sunrise because we had a patio at the time that would have the perfect view for sunrise. Then the catwalk always had a perfect view for sunset. So I would make sure that even if I'm not downstairs on the grass, I would get out on the patio or on the catwalk and I would get that sunrise light. And I think it was Wednesday that I was laboring on the grass. I would go outside and sit on the grass. And I try not to make a scene because I didn't want people coming to me and getting, like the EMT involved. Like, no, please just stay out of it. I'm out here because I need grass. But I have a feeling that my body knew that my baby was asynclitic. So she was like this. And what I heard from my doula and midwife is that it's harder for them to perform those cardinal movements for
Mm-hmm.
the babies to help out during the birth, to
Mm-hmm.
come through the birthing canal. And
Yeah.
so when my midwife realized that she was asynclitic, when they finally got there, I called them. It was Friday. So I labored all on my own just with my husband until Friday at 2 a.m. And that's when I called my
Beautiful.
doula, and I was like, they're getting, my contractions are very intense. They were very close together, about
Mm-hmm.
2 minutes apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this baby's coming.
Yeah.
Um, and so she finally came, and the midwife and doula ended up coming at the same time at around 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And I got checked a second time. This was the second time she checked, and she's like, yeah, you're about 8 centimeters dilated. This baby's coming soon. The
Mm-hmm.
baby didn't end up coming for like another 9 hours. And I
Mm-hmm.
have a feeling it was because of this.
Yeah.
And my body, she needed time for her head to mold.
Mm-hmm.
And my body just knew this. And that's why
Yeah.
from the beginning, and that's why the
Mm-hmm.
contractions were spreading out at night and then getting closer again and then spreading out. She just needed time. And I
Mm-hmm.
think Carrie refers to this as quantum coherence, where your cells are able to communicate with each other
Yeah.
and everything just is in tune and knows
Mm-hmm.
what's happening, even if
Yeah.
you don't really consciously know. And when
Mm-hmm.
I learned this, I was like, "Oh, I have goosebumps right now." I'm like, "Oh, wow, this is amazing!" Like, we
Yeah.
are created so perfectly in tune with nature. And she ended up
Mm-hmm.
coming. She came at noon.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. And I mean, that makes so much sense that it was 2 or 3 a.m. that your contractions were really, really on once it was time, because that is the most common time for contractions to start. And the more in tune a woman's circadian rhythm is, it's usually sometime in the evening or in the early morning. Like I was saying, I wake up in labor, because 3 a.m. is the melatonin peak. And melatonin is what makes the uterus receptive to oxytocin. And so that really high melatonin time is then telling the uterus, and that's part of the signal where it then suddenly is like, okay, now I'm receptive to oxytocin. Let's get, start squeezing. And so like that just makes so much sense that you were so in tune, and that was the time that it hit. That's definitely an indicator that your body was on point hormonally with everything.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And then, of course, birth can happen anytime because, like you said, all babies and mamas, the dance between them is different. And so the time of birth can happen at any time of day. Births do happen at any time of day. But that onset of labor, that usually happens in a circadian pattern.
That's amazing how you put that. That's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. So melatonin communicates with oxytocin. It
Yeah,
helps the uterus be more receptive to oxytocin.
that's right.
And
Mm-hmm.
we know that oxytocin is what helps the uterus perform those contractions. So
Yes.
now, is this subcellular melatonin? Or is it
Mm-hmm.
okay? So do you want
It
to?
is, but pineal melatonin also flows through the placenta, but the placenta actually makes melatonin too. And placental melatonin is so fascinating because it goes both directions. It nurtures the baby, but it also flows backwards to nurture the mother. So mother's melatonin is rising and rising and rising all the way through pregnancy, with a high, high, high peak at the time of birth in healthy pregnancies. And so melatonin levels are something which we're not talking about dysfunction in today's call. We're just talking about like how, the goodness of everything. But in the future, we might talk about how
Absolutely.
like melatonin testing is something that can like help identify early on like risks for preeclampsia or arrest of labor, or different things that can happen, because melatonin is a fertility hormone. It is part of the reproductive axis. So yeah,
Awesome.
it's really awesome. And then serotonin too is what they speculate. And so serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. And women that have really high like transcendental psychedelic experiences in labor tend to have high serotonin, which high serotonin then turns into high melatonin at night. Right. So it makes sense the body would want to raise that. But that's part of going outside in the daytime labor and get all of that like high serotonin flow from the light stimulation of the body.
Wow. From sunlight.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So fascinating. So would you Can you share with our audience a little bit more about what are some of the habits that you kept throughout your pregnancies so that you can have a smoother labor, especially with this
Mhm.
fourth one? And
Yeah.
if you continued with those and how they might be
Mhm.
helping right now postpartum.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think that I mean, you've already laid them out very well. It's seeing the sunrise in the morning. It's being barefoot on the ground. One thing you haven't mentioned is eating breakfast. Um,
Yeah.
Breakfast is a circadian cue, and during pregnancy, it's so important to have that really big, power-packed, high-protein meal in the morning. Yeah. So that's a really important part. And then watching the sunset and then having a fully dark night. So if, in pregnancy, it's normal to have sleep disruptions. So that's where having the house all cued to have low lighting is really important. That low light will help protect the pineal, the melatonin that's secreted from the pineal gland in the brain. That melatonin flows in the nighttime if it's dark. And so it's really important to be full dark, because even if you're sleeping in a dark room, if you go in the bathroom and flip on an overhead light, even if it's just for like a second, it's a
Mm-hmm.
nerve response to move back into cortisol secretion. Whereas it's like a buildup, it takes a couple hours to get back into melatonin.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's really important to have that full darkness of night, and to get adequate rest and sleep. And that's basically it. Like, it's really simple. Ultimately, it's just it's so powerful in how it can cascade through the body and all of the systems, and how it affects physical well-being, but also the mental, emotional well-being.
Awesome, awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
briefly, because I don't want to keep you too long, I want to be respectful of your time. Can you tell our followers how early in the morning would you have breakfast, or what's your recommendation for when to eat breakfast?
Oh, just as quick as you can. It's, it can be really difficult. I go outside first. And so I go outside for as long as I can. Like right now, it's pretty cold outside, so it's a shorter amount of time. In the summer, it's more warm, and so I'll spend a longer amount of time. I kind of set up a little like outdoor kitchen to be able to like do coffee and eggs out on the back porch.
Beautiful.
So
Beautiful.
like as I'm cooking, I'm getting the little bit of like extra sunlight there, especially in the summertime. That's nice. Yeah, and then, or go out, see the sunrise and everything, and then come back inside and eat at that point. But it helps stabilize blood sugars across the day. And that's one of the other things about I guess that I didn't say about food, is to try to fast through the night, which is really challenging in pregnancy, especially if you don't eat enough early in the day. um,
Mm-hmm.
and so, again, this is probably not the call for it, but the autophagy rhythm and the mitophagy rhythm
Mm-hmm.
are really important to doing all of the physiological things inside the womb to transform something from like a single cell through all of the embryological phases into a human baby. Like,
Wow.
there's so much remodeling that happens. And so autophagy is a remodeling process. And then also the collagen network is highly involved in that too, which is another thing that doing the earthing and the sunshine charges the collagen. Sunlight stimulates collagen growth. Um, and so when talking about like stretch marks, a really common complaint, and um,
I didn't
ex-
me.
yeah, excess cortisol attacks the collagen. And so having a good like melatonin heavy lifestyle supports the collagen, as does the sunlight supporting the collagen. And so it's, we're like rubbing all these, you see all the like belly butters and all that kind of thing. Meanwhile, like, what are you actually doing to support the integrity of the collagen network? Sunshine and grounding
Yes.
and eating your high protein diet and all of these things are going to help with that. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, everybody says, oh, it's genetic, and if your mom had it, you'll have it. My mom had it really bad. My sister
Mm-hmm.
had it a little bit, and I had none. Even though I have stretch marks
Beautiful.
I had stretch
Mm-hmm.
marks as a child, went from like going through that growth spurt on my chest and
Yeah.
hips, and they're
Mm-hmm.
old stretch marks, but I was convinced that I'd get them during pregnancy. I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
one. It was
Mm-hmm.
like amazing. And I had my bare belly out a lot because while pregnant, I was on the beach often, and I was up
Beautiful.
almost every single, pretty much every day I was outside multiple times a day. I would say for a few hours. I had that luxury, especially when I wasn't working in the hospital, because I was
Mm-hmm.
working in the hospital and sometimes late night, and the screens are everywhere. The non-native EMFs are everywhere, and that's when
Yeah.
classes. It was like the only thing that helped me. It was the one little thing I had to change while still being in the hospital, and it made a big difference because it would help me focus better, and I would get home with less irritability, and then go
Mm-hmm.
to sleep easier, and I still had great sleep even while pregnant. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. I was tracking my sleep through this last pregnancy, which was really interesting. Um, and I was seeing that in certain phases of the pregnancy, particularly the first trimester and the third trimester, it would take me 12 hours to get my full amount of like 8 hours of restful sleep. Um, because of all of the different night wakings. And so something that has been really empowering to me and that has changed across my pregnancies, I think the biggest difference is how I have felt about sleep. And once I started learning about polyphasic sleep patterns in humans, I was it just completely like opened my mind up to like the idea that even if I had a lot of night wakings, I didn't have to feel tired. And so just by like dedicating a longer amount of time to being in bed rather than like having this rigid idea of like, well, I laid down for 8 hours and so like that should be enough.
yeah,
No, because you're waking up, you need to go pee, you need to commune with your baby, you need to process thoughts when everyone else is resting. Um,
yeah,
there's so many things that happen during the night in pregnancy, not to mention a lot of certain body processes are happening then. So keeping the lights low and all of that,
mm-hmm.
so that you don't mess up your hormones, your melatonin hormones at night.
Yeah,
And then through the long night, and then wake up in the morning and go out and see sunrise. So even if you are a little, even when I do feel a little crusty around the edges, it usually resolves itself once I go outside and get that
yeah,
outdoor light. Whereas just sitting
that,
on the couch, like trying to drink coffee or whatever, like it won't work. And I remember my first baby, the tiredness after pregnancy and birth and all of that. And I remember just like sitting in the rocky chair, like having micro naps, just like not even able to stay awake. And then now my fourth baby, like presumably I should be so tired and homeschooling all these kids, like
yes.
I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old and the little baby, and my older one is 11, and I just feel great.
Awesome.
I
I
feel great.
love hearing it's possible.
Yeah.
Women think it's just this programmed idea that having a lot of kids and being at home with them, even homeschooling, I know it's difficult, but it's possible, and you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
feel like a zombie all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
And I think a lot of it was just the mindset too, because in my first, when I had one baby, like for one, I wasn't as experienced of a mom. But for two, I still just had the idea that I should be tired because of the sleep disruption.
yep.
And so once I was able to let go of that and just flow and be more easygoing with myself about it mentally, I think that has had a huge impact too.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. Yeah, I told
Mm-hmm.
my husband the other day, I don't feel like most women say that you're supposed to feel. Everybody asks me, "Oh, you're probably not getting a lot of sleep, right?" And I'm like, not really. I'm sleeping pretty good.
Yeah.
I sleep pretty good, and I sleep with my baby. So there is
Yeah.
a sacrifice there, and it can be difficult for a lot of women. But I think it's more difficult when the baby's away, having to get vertical and disrupt everything, turn on lights, and do what you got to do as a mom for a newborn. And I've been sleeping good, and I have energy in the day, and
Mm-hmm.
I have no issues with anxiety or depression or anything like this, and it's been beautiful. It's been just such a beautiful journey, and I'm excited to see what happens with the next one, because this is my first. So
Yeah.
right behind
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And it's so wonderful to connect with other moms who do want to have large families. It's like, kind of rare. And it's so interesting because like when I had 2, 3 seemed like a lot. And then now that I have 4, it doesn't feel like a lot.
Yeah. Oh,
And I'm
that's
not
so
like, I look at my family, I'm like, it just doesn't feel like a lot, even though, I mean, it is a lot. And other people be
yeah.
like, whoa, you have 4 kids. But I'm just kind of, in the midst of just marching through it. I'm like, wow, it's not what I expected
Awesome.
it to be at all.
Yeah.
And I totally credit the nature lifestyle, my kids spending so much time outside.
Beautiful.
They're robust and healthy, and yeah, just, pretty easygoing kids to, with all of this and them getting to, experience nature. And, they all know first thing in the morning when we get up, the first thing, I'm going to kick them out of the house. They're going to go outside.
Love it.
they're going to see, they're
Love
going to
it.
see the sunrise. And, it doesn't have, like I said, even just a couple minutes is enough to start getting the circadian entrainment. And then for the quantum sunlight, a lot of times it'll be after breakfast, then they'll go outside for that longer playtime out there. And we do some of the 100,000 hours outside curriculum for our homeschool, and that's super aligned. I mean, you don't have to be a homeschooler to see their,
What is that
to use
called?
their
Can you
program.
repeat
A
that?
thousand hours outside.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't
And
hear
so
that.
they have a nature tracker, and you just, keep track of your hours, and they have like pretty little mandalas that you can color in. So my oldest daughter is the one who manages this, and kind of keeps track of how they're doing. And then they can like write about what's the weather like, and what did you see, and like set goals for the season and different things.
Wow.
It's really sweet. I recommend it for adults too.
Oh, I'm going to look into this right after I get off this call. That's awesome.
Yeah.
One of my best friend homeschools, and that's why I want to homeschool as well, because of her.
Mm-hmm.
And she's
Yeah.
probably heard of it, but I'll run it by her and see what she thinks and what she says about
Mm-hmm.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, they have curriculum. I'm not really using the curriculum, but their nature trackers are cool. And their curriculum is probably really excellent too. So yeah, but I love that they have figured out, because they're looking at the research where they're just looking at like children's behavior. And they found that children who have about 3 hours outside a day just have astronomically better test scores, attention, way lower incidence of different health issues. And it's really clear that that's necessary for their development. And it's just amazing, like inside, like when everything's carpeted and white walls and safe, like there's so little variation, and kids get really bored and ornery, and you put them outside and there's like little dirt and rocks and
Yep.
like bugs and all these different things that it just like, captures that childish attention. And so all these things, like a kid who's just crazy cranky, and same thing with the baby. Like my husband startled the baby this morning when he was holding him, and my baby's just learning how to roll over. And so it was like, he startled himself and started crying, and he was like crying and crying for like, not a super long time, but my husband he knew what to do, and he just, picked him up. He's like, oh, it's all right, baby. And then just go take him out on the porch. And then he just like breathes that fresh air and looks around, and just next thing he's smiling again. And I remember that was my my first daughter too, that sometimes taking her outside was the only thing that would console her. And yeah, my baby's so easygoing and happy, and yeah, it's
that's beautiful.
all that time outside, because nature is life. Yeah. And so when they're full of life, they're happy. It's like when they're grasping for it and like trying to fill that bucket, that I think a lot of have challenges on all the levels, like we've talked about. There's the mental, there's the physical, there's the emotional, like all these different things just kind of can get synchronized by that light that penetrates all the way through. Sunlight goes in all the way through our bones. It's not just like a skin thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And along the same lines that you're saying about your baby, my husband's with my baby right now, and he has been with her for a big chunk of today in pieces. She's very attached to me because I'm with her like 23 and a half, 7. And she knows if I'm on the phone or computer, she demands even more attention. She cries if I'm not near her. If I walk from out of her view and walk somewhere else, she cries. If I hand her over to my husband, sometimes she cries. And so I told him, I said, hey, I have this very important interview and call with Nikko. It's going to be amazing. I need you to please take her. And the thing is, she just woke up from a nap. So I was like, oh man, she's gonna be awake while you're taking care of her. So we gotta figure out something. I said, just take her outside. Stay outside. We have a big giant schnauzer. I said, stay outside with the dog, put her on the grass, let her get dirty, which he's really good at letting her get dirty anyway. She's
Good.
like filthy sometimes, which is okay. I never get upset about it. But
yeah,
I just watched them pass by right now, and she's so content. And I know it's because when I left her with him, I put her on the grass, and the dog was out there, and she just starts playing with the grass, and she's in the sunlight, and she's just happy. And that's what I have to do when I know she's cranky, and I'm like,
yeah,
she doesn't need a nap. She didn't eat. I always take her outside. We go outside and we just walk around the block, or I take her swimming. We go to the pool, and it just calms everyone down, myself included.
yeah, definitely. As far as like, staving off the mood disorders that are so common after this time for men and women, you know, the whole family, if one person gets a diagnosis, it's really likely other people in the family will, because a lot of it's lifestyle and environment based.
Exactly.
And what we're learning through the circadian rhythm, if melatonin gets, you know, disrupted, then then problems in all systems of the body can emerge. And so when we're doing these things, and going outside is like direct hits of cellular melatonin, because that infrared is always present in sunlight. So yeah, going outside is just such a key way to, you know, regulate everything all at once.
Yes, awesome. Nikko, thank you so much for getting on this call with me today.
Yeah.
I hope we can get together again and discuss some of these topics that you mentioned, infrared, melatonin, the uterus, and the entire cascade of hormones that take place. I would love to be able to do these again in the future with you and for our follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will be wonderful, and that your experiences and your knowledge of the muscular system and, fascia and all of that is completely charged up by these lifestyle things. And I'm sure you've seen it in your patients, how healing it can be. And so, it is really wonderful. And we can, collaborate to make some really good, useful guides for people.
Absolutely. I can't wait. Thank you so much. It's also fascinating.
You too.
I hope this has been inspiring for other women and men and whoever's listening. And hopefully everyone can start adding these small changes that can make a huge difference in their life.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's definitely changed my life and my family's life. And I've seen it for other people too, that, you know, challenges with sleep and pain and all of that can just vanish almost overnight. Like it takes only 2 or 3 days to really get entrained. And like you were talking about earlier, how, your mom had certain issues that then you didn't go on to have, but you might have if you hadn't adopted these lifestyles, because the circadian rhythm is first programmed in the womb. And so that's one final piece that I think is really valuable for people to know, is that they're potentially setting their child up for a lifetime of either regulation or dysregulation, because that time in the womb and the first 3 years of life is when those rhythms are set. And that's when they will entrain that as normal. And they will believe that they are night owls or crappy sleepers or whatever kind of thing, but it can always be reset, is the powerful thing about it. So even if the early part was rough, or like for people who have already had kids and like, oh, I didn't know this, and I had, the hospital birth with all the bells and whistles and the NICU stay and the jaundice and, the crappy latching, and it was so hard. And then even after going through all of that, you can adopt these lifestyle practices and watch your child's health transform back towards, the natural, robust vitality that is all of our birthright on Earth. And as well for ourselves to then have the smooth physiological birth, even if the first one wasn't that way. And you are so lucky to have had that beautiful first experience, to know that it's powerful and possible. And you were so smart to find all of this and dig in and put it into practice.
Yes, thank you so much. I was determined. Thank you. You lay everything out so beautifully. I feel like you said you enjoy writing and reading, but you're also such a great speaker, something I aspire to be more of.
Thank you.
Writing. I need to become a better reader, but writing has been something I enjoy more, and that's how I learn. And I love reading your work. So I want to share also with my followers that if you aren't subscribed to Nikko's website, She
Mm-hmm.
has a free subscription, and she also has a paid subscription. She also has a different tier for practitioners, a different
Mm-hmm.
subscription that opens up more. If you want to share about that, can you do that
Mm-hmm.
really quick?
Yeah, sure. So Brighter Days, Darker Nights is a Substack publication, and I've been publishing there since 2021. And so everything there is in the archive. And then if you subscribe for free, I have a protocol for pregnancy to stabilize and strengthen the circadian rhythm. And then you also get new posts that I send. If you become a paid subscriber, I have a workshop that's like 4 hours of really going into the science and practice of putting it all into play. And inside of that, you'll do like a lighting inventory for your home and like a sunshine plan for your family and things like that. And there's some other classes in there too, like about sleep and different things that I'm learning about. And then for practitioners, the practitioners tier also opens up my Google Drive that it has hundreds of papers about this. So for people that are research minded, that higher level subscription, higher level, it's $150 a year to
Very
be in that.
affordable.
And it is what I literally use this Google Drive as I'm researching. So there are new papers going into that every single week as I'm researching for these posts. I catalog everything meticulously. And so when you add it to your Google Drive, it's really cool because then you can search it and it's like your own little search engine of PubMed that I've already filtered for you.
Awesome.
And
So
then
awesome.
you can chat me in there too and be like, oh, hey, I have, do you know of anything else like this or, whatever, that kind of thing.
That's
So
amazing.
it's kind of a social thing. Yeah. And then I did just launch a new private mentorship program for people who want to teach this. And so that has one-to-one calls with me in addition to the learning materials. So yeah, you can message me on Instagram to get any of those since that's where we are, and I can send the link. And there's free trials on all of it too. So if you just want to check it out and blaze through everything in a week and just download it, you can do that for free too. So
That's amazing. Wow. Thank you so
yeah.
much, Nikko. Your work is
Mm-hmm.
brilliant, and
Oh,
we're
thank you.
grateful. I'm so grateful to have you on here. I feel honored. Hi.
Mm-hmm. Oh, perfect. Yep.
It's
Here's my
okay. I
family.
know
They're
it's
ready
that
for me.
time. It's that time. Thank you so much for joining me, Nikko. I feel honored. Hi, cutie pie. All right.
Yeah. Here's
All
the
right.
little guy. Hi,
Hi,
baby.
sweet boy. Oh, you're
Yeah.
so sweet. Thank you
All right.
again, Nikko.
Perfect time to get off the screen now.
Perfect. Okay. Bye, Nikko.
Awesome. Bye.